Welcome to Behind the Prop Podcast, where each week we will bring you stories, lessons, and some tips from behind the prop. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Pre-show checklist, microphones.
Check.
Sound check.
Complete.
Recording all channels.
Checked and verified. Pre-show checklist complete.
Our Bravo Tango Papa is holding short, ready for departure.
Bravo Tango Papa, you are clear for takeoff. Have a great show.
You're clear for takeoff and Wilco. Bravo Tango Papa.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I'm good. Today we're going to visit a subject that I think many of our listeners are going to enjoy. Some will want to debate the pros and cons, but today we're going to pigtail off of a blog post you wrote not too long ago called Paper versus Plastic. Tell us a little bit about the show.
Yeah, paper versus plastic. 10 years ago, if you heard that, you'd think you were in line at the grocery store. And this is, aviation is evolving, the technology is evolving, and you have two choices. You can either jump on the bandwagon or not, and I think the bandwagon is moving, so I think we're all better served to at least jump on it and give it a shot. And what I'm getting at is when I became an examiner about 4 years ago, I would say 90% of my applicants came in with paper charts, 10% electronic with an electronic flight bag. And I would say in the last 4 years, the shift has turned into 90% electronic, 10% paper. And I do work closely with one flight school who still requires their private pilot applicants to use paper charts, but that's one flight school, and I understand their philosophy. And but we're going to talk about where we are, the products that are out there, and the advantages of both, quite frankly, because there are advantages to both. Again, just let's just take a look at old school back in the day. You know, when I started many years ago. If you were going to plan a cross country, you got your sectional out, and if you planned it right, your cross country took place on one side of one sectional. But if it were a longer cross country, you're taping sectionals together. Maybe you had to buy two Houston sectionals because you're using the front and the back of it. And, you drew your line from point A to point B. And
I'm curious, as a professional pilot, when you started, it was more than 4 years ago. Like, did you plan a flight across country with sectionals, or was there some other dispatch mechanism by which you were using GPS, or how did that really work when there were no EFBs?
No, it was all paper. You laid out the sectional on the table, and you drew a really long line if it were a long cross country. You went, you got your winds aloft. You measured your distance. You knew what your true airspeed ought to be, and then you went and you. What now with the electronic products we have today, looking at a cross country, if I'm going from point A to point B, I can put the 2 points in there, and I can upload my winds or download my winds rather, and look at all the altitudes and pick the most advantageous altitude. It takes about 30 seconds, where years ago, it took maybe 30 minutes just to pick your altitude.
Right. And
so from a time standpoint, what we have now is much better and more dynamic as far as accuracy as well.
So the key, both of us talked a little bit before we started the show, that the number one key, whether you're using electronic or paper or what your school has some rules around either one of those, the real key is understanding what you're trying to accomplish and what tool you're going to use, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If it's paper or plastic, meaning electronic flight bag, you really need to understand what winds are they using in this electronic flight bag, how are they calculating this magnetic heading for me, etc. But if you don't know what a a blue airport is on a piece of paper or if it's on an electronic version of that piece of paper, that's a problem, right? The fundamental learning is still the key that people listening to this show need to do as private pilot students. You need to understand those charts and all of the many legend items that you need to know to be a safe and effective pilot. That's job number one.
Absolutely, and the one advantage, and it can be a disadvantage. I mean, either way you look at it. I mean, with a paper sectional, you've got the legend right there. If you want to, what are those little notches around the airport at 3, 6, and 9 o'clock mean? Gee, I forgot what that was. Well, you can go over there and look at it. Where in an electronic version, that legend may be buried somewhere within your electronic flight bag. So you need to be able to get to that. But just from what I'm looking for as an examiner, and I get this not so much anymore, but I still get probably once a month. I'll get an applicant will get in touch with me before the check ride and say, can I use electronic? Can I use an EFB for the check ride? Or actually what they will say, they will ask what I prefer. And I say, I prefer that you use what you're going to use tomorrow when you take your family on a cross-country flight. If you're going to use paper tomorrow, let's use paper today. If you're going to use electronic tomorrow, let's use electronic today. I don't want you to use electronic today or paper today and electronic tomorrow. So let's use what you're going to use. And that was really the subject of my blog that I wrote several months ago. If you're interested in reading it, you can find it on my website. It's my name, WallyMulherndPE.com, and go down and take a look at that. And it's a quick read. I think it's fairly interesting. I've gotten a lot of positive on that. But my point is, both of these paper or plastic are both correct, and there's not there are advantages and disadvantages with both, obviously, but they both are acceptable and they both are correct.
I see on social media sometimes, Wally, somebody will post something and say, I hear that it's illegal to use an electronic flight bag as your primary source of navigation. Can we talk about that a little bit to clear the skepticism up? Am I allowed to legally use an electronic flight bag for my maps and my charts and those sorts of artifacts?
Absolutely, for your maps and your charts, that's perfectly legal. Where we get into the not so legal is when maybe you're in an airplane that doesn't have any navigation capability, and you file an IFR flight plan, and ATC clears you direct to wherever, and you're using your iPad to actually navigate. Now, if you want to use your iPad or your electronic device to depict the charts, that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable. And with that in mind, one technique that I will tell people that I try to do, I usually forget, but I try to do, if I am going on a cross-country flight, one thing I try to do is if I'm going to Jackson, Mississippi, I'm just making that up. If I will go in and I will take a screenshot of all the approach plates. So not only do I have my approach plates within the app that I'm using as the electronic flight bag, but I also have them over there in my photos. So if for whatever reason that app were to crash, which I've never had an app crash, but nowadays taking screenshots is such an easy thing to do. And then after the flight, I just go in and then delete all those photos. So that might be a way to help the possibility of the app crashing. The other thing is, have a backup. With most of the electronic flight bags, you're able to get more than one download. You pay for it. You pay for the subscription. You can probably get it on an iPad. and probably an iPhone. So, for instance, the app that I use, I have on 2 iPads. I have a regular size iPad. I have an iPad mini, and then it's on my phone. And then I always have my airline issued iPad that has a different app. So I really have 3 backups in case of a malfunction with the iPad, which again I've never had. They do sometimes overheat, and you'll get a little warning. It'll basically say, hey, this thing's about to shut down if you don't cool it down. So if you're keeping the iPad up on the glare shield or something like that, if you have it mounted pretty high in the sun, that can be a problem or an issue. Just something that you need to manage. I won't say a problem, but it's something that definitely needs to be managed.
I'm like you. I do carry an iPad mini. It's my knee board for all intents when I'm flying. So my iPad mini, I will call it primary from a standpoint of what I'm using to visually reference the maps and charts and things like that, connected to a Stratus for me in 99% of my flights. I always carry my bigger iPad in my flight bag. That's my first big backup, I'll call it. And I won't fly without the big one. It's kind of like part of my flight bag. It is definitely a tool that if it's not there, I'm not going. Because I truly think that it is my second set of maps and charts. And then, of course, like you do, I have it on my phone. I haven't tried the screenshot, but that's a great idea. I don't think I've ever seen ForeFlight crash, but I have seen apps start to update and not finish updating. So if ForeFlight started to update when I was on the ramp somewhere, because I connected to Wi-Fi, not updating the charts, but the actual app, and then it didn't finish before I got in the cockpit. That could be something that would surprise you.
Yeah.
The other thing I do is I went out and I invested in a really good battery. So I probably spent the $100 bill on a battery that will charge all of those devices at least once. So it's got a lot of power in it, and then it's readily available. So if for some reason I don't have an electronic source in my aircraft, I've invested in this battery that will produce enough power to charge all those things so that I don't go somewhere and then can't use these tools to come back. I think of it as a full day charge, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Battery life is an issue. When I have 2 check ride days, a significant amount of my thought process of the day is keeping my things charged, whether it be on the ground portion, typically 2 hours on the ground, 2 hours in the airplane, and then 2 hours on the ground, 2 hours in the airplane. I definitely have to manage the power. I also have an extra battery. I find myself now, one of the first things I'm looking for is when I get in an airplane as an examiner is I look to see if there's my ability to charge my device when I get in the airplane. And we're beginning to see that a little bit more in airplanes. I know in our personal airplane we have 4 USB ports on the panel, so we're able to keep everything charged all the time, which is a big help. And that is probably the downside to the electronic flight bags is they run out of battery power, and a paper chart does not. So that right there is an advantage. One thing that I see from paper charts is with an electronic flight bag, you're able to squeeze out the scale. And so you may be flying from Houston to Seattle, and you squeeze it out, and it's the width of your iPad. It doesn't look like a very long flight. Whereas if you're going to plan that on a paper chart, it's probably going to take about 6 sectionals and going to take up the whole room to see the enormity of the flight that you're about to fly. And so with the paper charts, you're always on a common scale, where with the iPad, you're able to change that scale. And sometimes that can confuse people a little bit. They think it's not a very long flight when it actually is a very long flight. The other thing I see is just understanding the basic concepts. I hear applicants use the phrase course heading all the time. And I say course heading, that makes absolutely no sense because course and heading are two different things. Now, the numbers could be the same in a no-win situation. They could be the same, or a direct headwind or a direct tailwind. The numbers could be the same, but I think sometimes with the electronic version of this, the applicant maybe doesn't understand the concepts. Just putting a plotter down on the paper and coming up with that initial number, which of course is true course, and then applying the wind, coming up with true heading, and then applying the variation and coming up with magnetic heading, I think helps the applicant learn the concept maybe a little bit better than with the electronic version. So I know in ForeFlight, they don't even give you true course. The first thing that you get when you put the line down on the iPad is a magnetic course. So that is something that we don't even come up with using paper. We go from true course to true heading to magnetic heading. So there's a little bit of confusion because I will get into that with the applicants, what the difference in all these things are, and how we compute them.
I was challenged one time on that. I printed out a navlog for someone and was talking through it, and I was asked, when did this? What is this magnetic heading getting generated from? If this was printed 2 days in advance for a check ride I have with Mr. Mulhern coming up, and I'm a nervous wreck about that, what is that magnetic heading coming from? Is it from today's winds, 3 days ago winds, or the forecasted winds that I printed based on a departure time from 3 days ago? And if the applicant doesn't know how to answer that, they probably should do a little bit of research on where that magnetic heading's coming from, because it's not a no-wind compass heading for that given moment in time that you hit print.
Right.
And I think that's what we keep going back to, is this is all about the fundamentals of learning what you're using. Paper versus plastic really is not the bigger problem. It's, do you fundamentally know how you're going to navigate?
I actually had a check ride yesterday, and the young man had used paper, and the winds were significantly different than what he had planned for, and he had difficulty finding his checkpoints. He really did. The winds were much stronger. I'm not sure if the direction was different, but they were significantly stronger than forecast. And I asked him when he got those winds. He said, well, I figured this out last night. And so the winds were probably 18 hours old and weren't very accurate. And again, the advantage to plastic, an electronic flight bag, is as you are walking out the door of the FBO or the flight school, if you've got Wi-Fi or if you've got a cellular plan on your iPad, all you have to do is hit update, or I know ForeFlight calls it pack. All you got to do is pack for the flight, and you're going to get the most up-to-date winds that are possible.
Yeah, and I think that's when I learned. We kind of picked all those points. You kind of picked all the true course that you were going to take, and you kind of left all that calculating to the last minute, or you made multiple copies of that. You practiced it with your CFI, and you did one today, but the one you were going to use for that check ride, you left blank, and that way you could wake up at least and pick what are the wins at that moment and build a pretty good plan. And I do think I have become a child of ForeFlight now, to where I draw the 2 points, I go direct Austin, and then I figure out what I'm going to fly. It does change quite a bit when I'm doing it, and when I'm going to file IFR, because it's not just a straight line, right? I have to navigate to a few points, and I find myself flying headings more than I fly a magenta line normally when I file an IFR flight plan, because I'm not going to just be going direct, and I'm probably not going to be able to see the ground, so I'm going to really stay focused on that heading that I'm flying for sure. When it comes to generalities in your life as a DP, people want you to say what they want to use. What do you prefer in the world? How much longer do you think we're going to be using paper plates and paper charts?
That's a very that's an interesting question. We have come so far in such a short period of time. When I first started with the airline, every pilot was issued a set of Jepson charts, and every 2 weeks you got a big envelope in your file in the chief pilot office, and you had to go revise that. I know when I was a charter pilot many years ago, we had full U.S. coverage for every airport that we could fly to, and I was in charge of keeping those updated. And what I would do is what I determined was the amount of postage on the envelope was equal to about the time that it took me to do that revision. In other words, if it was $1.50 in postage, it was about an hour and a half to do that update.
Wow.
And today, now the updates are a mere tap of the iPad, and you tell it to update. Now, it may take a while if it's a significant update, but you can go to sleep while it's updating.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, you have all the low en route charts, all the sectional charts, all the AFD information. I mean, you get a ton of stuff in that subscription. And I would say the economics have changed drastically, where you might pay $9 for a sectional list price somewhere. Well, you're 10 sectionals in, and you've got yourself a subscription to ForeFlight,
right?
For not just one sectional, but for every section in the United States,
right?
It's the economics that I think are driving some of this as well. And as a flight school owner who still sells a lot of paper plates to make sure we're a full service shop, the plates I'm carrying have dwindled drastically. We used to have people come in here and they would buy something that would help them get to Seattle, as your example said earlier. But today, if I carried a Seattle sectional, I'm not going to sell it. It's just going to get thrown away. And so it's definitely a loser for the flight school, but it's something that we have to make sure we're teaching people how to fly the best they can fly. But I don't know if we're going to be I don't know if we'll be selling paper plates in 5 more years. I don't know how many, we went from chart supplements for really the entire United States down to where we only have the Texas, the SC5, SC4, and SC3 is about all we have now for South Central. We have a bunch of 5s because that's where we're at, and we probably carry 2 3s and 1 4 each 54-day cycle or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I would just be throwing that away, and that doesn't do the environment any good, and I don't think it's going to do aviation any good for a whole lot longer.
Right, and I know at my airline, one of the selling points for the pilots to go to an iPad was the weight savings in the airplanes. Each pilot, and sometimes a 3-pilot, sometimes a 4-pilot, but usually a 2-pilot airplane, each of us was carrying a 35-pound flight bag. And so that's 70 pounds that every airplane was flying around. And so they were able to quantify just the weight savings. If we take 70 pounds off of every flight, we're going to save 2 gallons of fuel.
Yep.
And then you start multiplying that towards a big airline, and sometimes that side of things. Now I know in general aviation, the fact that we've got maybe a 10-pound flight bag rather than an 18-pound flight bag, it's something that we would probably really never recognize. But that is one way that the airlines were able to quantify it and actually justify the the electronic flight bags.
Well, I'm sure that weight and those gallons mean a lot to the airlines for sure. I think to me, the ability to use something electronic is a game changer. The one I know, right? But I can't imagine ever carrying around a charge supplement book for any part of the United States. So for me, I think plastic is always going to win. The EFB is always going to win. And I think if the airlines are using it, it's going to be something that we're all going to use, and paper will probably fall a distant second to this electronic flight bag world. If you're a private pilot, instrument pilot, commercial pilot in training, keep in mind that it's not illegal to use those charts as your primary source. You just can't navigate with that tool. As always, anything to wrap with, Wally, as we close this episode out?
I will say, as an examiner, and when someone books a check ride with me, they'll get a letter from me, a confirmation that says the check ride was confirmed. But in the letter, it does say that I will have them disable the ability to display their airplane on the electronic flight bag if they choose to use that, because we are required to for private and for a private check ride, we are required to see pilotage and dead reckoning, and you're not really seeing that if you're just following yourself. You're playing a video game with your iPad. So I do have them disable that, and with an instrument, of course, just flying down a line on an ILS doesn't show me a whole lot. They need to be able to use the installed equipment in the airplane. So and so many of my applicants, when I remind them of that before we walk out to the airplane, they say, "Well, how do I do that?" And I have to show them how to do that on their device, which tells me that they haven't been practicing that way. So that might be something to practice. Actually, try flying these approaches without the display of your own ship on the airplane, or on the plate rather.
Yeah, that's a note to CFIs out there. CFIs, practice without the visual reference of that aircraft on your plates. It'll make your students much better pilots for sure, and understand their equipment. No question. As always, fly safe out there. Until next week, stay behind the prop.
Bravo Tango Papa, we are clear of the active runway and would like to taxi to park.
Bravo Tango Papa, taxi to park. Great show. Have a nice day.
Taxi to park, thanks. You too, Bravo Tango Papa.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Prop. Please follow us on social media at Behind the Prop, or visit our website, www.behindtheprop.com. Until next week, fly safe, everyone.